Welcome to I guess maybe the third or fourth virtual mound visit. Interestingly enough, today I'm going to talk about mound visits. That's my topic. Since this is called a virtual mound visit, um, for fans, I think mound visits sometimes can become very boring, especially if a coach is trying to give the pitcher the bullpen a little bit more time to warm up, and he takes a leisurely stroll out to the mound just so that he can get a few more pitches out of his reliever in the bullpen. That's the purpose of that, of course, and then sometimes the conversations on the mound get long, and the umpire has to come out and either tell the coach, "Hey, make a change," or get back to the dugout. And so the fans, I think, sometimes get bored with that, unless, of course, the coach and the umpire start jawing back and forth, and then the fans kind of like that, I think. But a lot of times people ask me, what do coaches talk about when they make a mound visit? That's one of the most frequently asked questions when I talk to a baseball fan. And they're really interested in the game. And sometimes they see pitchers laughing out there, they see the catcher laughing, or they see the coach animated, and so I can understand why they would be curious. But even though for the fans those mound visits sometimes are boring, many times they are crucial for the coach and for the pitcher, for the infielder, for the entire team, because what coaches most of the time talk about are one of several things. One could be maybe they see that their pitcher is lacking confidence, and so they want to go out and encourage him and help him. And then sometimes maybe the pitcher's not getting some calls. Maybe the umpire strike zone gets a little small. And so sometimes the coach just needs to go out there and just sort of help the pitcher calm down a little bit and get refocused, settling down. Sometimes in a crucial situation, we see a pitcher get tight, and a coach can read that. And sometimes the coach's mound visit is all about loosening that guy up, and that's sometimes when a coach might share a funny story, or maybe the fans see the players laughing a little bit on the mound or something like that. Sometimes if a pitcher is kind of lollygagging, sometimes the coach needs to go out there and pardon the terminology, needs to jerk a knot in the pitcher's tail a little bit. And sometimes it becomes a kind of a heart-to-heart, if you will, come to Jesus meeting. And so sometimes that's the purpose. And then, like I mentioned, sometimes it's about strategy. It's all about, hey, this is make sure you understand this is what we're doing, and this is a bunt situation, or this is a first and third situation, or this remember, this hitter really has trouble with the breaking ball, or he has trouble with a fastball in. Whatever the strategy is, sometimes that's what it's about. Most of us, all of us, I think, on this podcast know that. There's one mound visit in my career that really stands out, and it occurred in 1987. I still remember the year. I still remember the game. I still remember the situation. I remember that we had, I think it was a one-run lead against Auburn in the SEC tournament. And back in those days, the SEC tournament was played on college campuses. So I remember this tournament being played at the University of Georgia. And we were playing Auburn. And Auburn had a guy that you probably recognize his name, a guy by the name of Frank Thomas. He's a Hall of Famer. He was a really, really good hitter. And so Auburn has a couple of guys on. I think they have men on second and third. There's two outs in the bottom of the ninth. And we've got a one-run lead, and Frank Thomas is up. And I bring my closer in from the bullpen. My closer's name is Steve Kulker. He's from Chicago. He had a great personality. He was a fun guy to coach. He had a really good fastball, but his fastball, guys, and this was probably speaks to my lack of ability to help him, but his fastball was as straight as a string. I mean, he had very little movement, but he threw really hard. He ended up making it to AAA with the Orioles. Had a decent slider. So I bring Steve in, and he's ready to go. He knows Big Frank's the hitter. He knows the situation. And I said, Steve, I usually don't say things like this in this situation, but the game is on the line, and a potential NCAA tournament berth is on the line. And I just laid it out there. I said, this is what's at stake. And here's where you have to throw your fastball. You have to throw your fastball right under Big Frank's hands. If you throw it any other place, Auburn's going to win, we're going to lose. I don't ever remember doing that before because I didn't want my pitchers to be tight. But I knew Steve could handle it because of his personality. And no sooner do I get back to the dugout and I turn around and watch, Steve's in the windup, and he delivers that really good fastball, and sure enough, it is right under Frank's hands. And Frank swings at it, pops it up to our third baseman, and we win the game. It was like, man, it came together. I had this feeling I needed to challenge Steve and tell him exactly what was on the line. And I really believed in him, and he delivered. And he really believed in me, and he executed exactly what I told him to do. It was one of those rare moments that coaches have when it all clicks and you win the game. So I started thinking about that this morning for some reason. And I started thinking about if I had not challenged Steve, if I had not sensed that he believed in how I wanted him to execute, that wouldn't have worked. But Steve believed in me. Now, if he'd have believed in me, but had he not tried to execute, it would have done no good at all. So the point of that story is found in James 2:17. And because there's a lot of people that have faith, but very few people execute. Very few people deliver. And, you know, James says, faith without works is dead. Faith without works is dead. And then he goes on to say, and I'm going to use some scripture that I've heard John Zeller use many times. And that is, you know what? It's one thing to believe. Most people believe. Even the demons believe. But if you don't execute faith, then it really does no good. So I guess with all of the racial tension that we have in America today, and I've heard, just like you guys, I've heard a lot of comments. I've seen a lot of people take a bold stand. And I started thinking about all of my former players, my African-American players. Guys like Kenny Miller and Vince Harrison and Pookie Jones and many really, Steve Phillips, really quality guys. I mean, salt of the earth kind of guys. And I loved them, and I really, and I still love them. And I've always believed they knew that, but I never ever once had that real conversation with them about what's it like growing up in Joliet, Illinois, being the only African-American kid on your team. But you know what? If you're as good as Kenny Miller was at shortstop, he probably handled that okay, and I'm sure his teammates loved playing with him. But I don't know what it was like for him growing up, being a fifth grader and maybe being the only black kid in his class. I don't know what it was like for Pookie Jones to play left field and and quarterback for Kentucky and going to places like Georgia and Tennessee, there's no telling what he heard. I actually heard some of the things he heard at Tennessee one time, and it was heartbreaking. And with all those guys, all the African-American guys I coached, I think Pookie Jones was the only guy maybe I had that conversation with because of what happened to him on a baseball field one time. So I just think it's really a good time for us to have those heart-to-heart conversations with our African-American friends. I think that is one way, just one way. It's not the only way, but it's one way to put our faith in action, to let them know that we love them with the love of Christ. And that's what I intend to do, even though it's late in the game, man. It's John, I used to hear Ron Bishop say, man, I'm not in the fourth quarter, I'm in overtime. And that's kind of where I am in my life. But it's not too late. It's not too late for us to do that. So that's my goal. And there's been a lot of ugly stuff happen this past week, but there's been a lot of positive things happen. And one of the positive things is me wanting to put my faith in action just a little bit more.